Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you would help people to see past me and experience you. God, I pray that as I talk, they would be able to hear your heart. God, thank you for the incredible privilege that you give us in your words. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen. I want to tackle one of the most important questions that I think people face. In fact, I'm pretty confident that every single person in this room has either faced this question in the past or is presently facing it right now. For some of you, this question is the single thing that is keeping you from having faith. And others of you, this question is what is making it impossible for you to have that next gear that other people have to be able to find that next level of their faith. So this question is incredibly important. I want to start off today by sharing with you the first time I ever wrestled with this question. I was in 7th grade. I was in Colorado, and I was minding my own business. I was in class, and something kind of traumatic happened to me in a few minutes. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. The teacher left the room for a while, and it took me about a minute to get bored. And then I leaned over, and I asked what I thought was a pretty innocuous question. I thought it wasn't a big deal, so I asked the kid next to me, his name was Mike Anderson, "What did you do this weekend?" And he told me he went to church. And then I asked a follow-up question. I said, "What church do you go to?" I didn't really, and I wasn't aware of it at the time, but most of the students that were sitting around us were not believers, and in fact, most of them were opposed to anyone who followed Christ. And so Mike answered my second question. He said that I go to the Happy Church. I don't know too much, except for that's probably not a great name for a church. But when he said he went to the Happy Church, it kind of unleashed a group of people being able to ridicule this kid. In fact, there was one girl, and she had kind of the female superpower where girls, especially young girls, have the ability to, with one single question, make you question who you are and question your very identity. Well, this girl was super popular, and she was asking him really pointed questions like, "Do you mean you're one of those people who follow Jesus?" And it was so stressful for me. I remember even now because it was the first time it ever became difficult for me to follow Jesus. And not only was it one kid, it was this girl, and then other people were peppering with questions, and people were saying stuff like, "Do you mean everybody that goes to your church is happy?" And then it just was a free-for-all. And so badly, I wanted to be able to step in, and I wanted to be able to help, and I wanted to be able to say, "Hey, there are some compelling reasons why you should follow Jesus." There was only one problem. I did not have any compelling reasons. In fact, not only did I not have any compelling reasons, I didn't even have a single reason why anyone should consider follow Jesus. And at the time, I wasn't very popular, and there weren't a lot of people that really liked me, and I didn't fit in. And in the next few minutes, I did something that I'm not very proud of. In the next few minutes, I joined in with all of the other middle schoolers, and I started ridiculing this young guy for following Jesus. I still regret it to this day. In fact, that was a very painful moment, and probably the reason it was so painful was because it was the first time following Jesus ever really cost me something. I want to ask you a question. Do you have a compelling reason to follow Jesus? And here's the question we're going to wrestle with today. Is it worth it? When was the first time that following Jesus actually cost you something? When was the first time that following Jesus was inconvenient, uncomfortable, or difficult? We're in the midst of a series on exploring the unknown, and we're talking about 6 different characters, and we've gone through systematically Mark chapter 5 through chapter 8, and we've given you personal encounters with Jesus. Today, we're going to look at the clueless disciple. This person became somebody super important. His name is Peter. But at this point, he was as clueless as anyone I ever know. And I love this about the Bible is that the disciples, throughout these passages in Mark 5, 6, 7, and 8, Jesus keeps telling them that you don't even understand anything. He says, you have eyes, but you can't see. You have ears, but you don't hear. I don't even know why I put up with you because you don't even understand the most basic things. So moving with me, if you will, in your Bibles to Mark chapter 8. We're going to start with verse 27. Jesus and his disciples went on the villages around Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked them what seemed to be a pretty simple question. Who do people say I am? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say that I am? Now, if I was to stop the service and bring a microphone and go right up next to you and I was to say to you, who do you say Jesus is? What would you say? What would you say in a sentence or two? Peter's the most bold one. He's the most outgoing. He's the one that doesn't care what anyone else thinks. And watch what he says. Peter answered, you are the Messiah. If we were to read Matthew's account into this, Jesus stops right there. He calls Peter out and he says, that is an incredible answer. It's so good. I'm going to build the church on the very foundation of understanding this at this moment. But since Peter was the one that gave Mark his information, as we read Mark's account of the gospel, he didn't bring any of that up, probably because what was about to happen was as traumatic for Peter as what happened to me when I was in 7th grade. Jesus warned them not to tell anyone. So here's Peter, and he finally understands that Jesus is the Messiah. He has started to get some of the pictures where Jesus has power over the supernatural. He has power over the nature itself. He has power over disease and death, and they're starting to see Jesus unique, not like anyone else. And they understand that he is the long-promised Messiah. But they have no idea about Jesus' mission, and they have no idea what his mission includes. And Jesus is about to take them on a journey where it is going to become personally costly to follow Jesus. From this moment on, it was pretty simple all the way up to that, and you could be a follower of Jesus and everything was great. But according to Matthew chapter 16, this is the defining moment in the book where it says, at this time he turned towards Jerusalem, and he was single-mindedly focused towards going there. They don't have any idea what's about to happen to them, but Jesus warns them not to tell anyone about it. Then Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things. You see, I'm going somewhere, and I'm going to have to suffer many things. Be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and that I must be killed. Now, it was going to become costly and difficult, and the people there who had all the influence were going to reject him. They were going to publicly humiliate him. He was going to have to suffer, and then he was going to have to die. Verse 32, Jesus spoke plainly about this. I love this because they missed all of it. Jesus spoke plainly about the fact that it was about to become difficult. About the fact it was going to be costly. It was going to cost them more than they even could imagine. Before I move forward, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of think about where you are in the faith. Some people are like curious observers, and you look out and you say, you know what, I'm not really one of those Jesus followers, but I think it's kind of interesting that those people are like that. Some of you are more where you're cautious, and what you do is you look at it and you say, I think that there is this guy named Jesus, and some of his teachings were really cool, and I think it's great that other people are able to follow him. I think there's a few of you in this room that I would call cautious benefactors. And what a cautious benefactor is, I'm in for following Jesus as long as it doesn't become difficult, costly, or hard. And here's what I mean by that. You're like, okay, I'll follow Jesus, I'll do what he says, unless you ask me to do something uncomfortable. Like if you ask me to share my faith with somebody else, then there's no way I'm all in for following Jesus when it benefits me. But if it becomes difficult or costly or hard, there is no way I'm in for that. Watch what Jesus says. Verse 32, Jesus spoke plainly about this. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. And I could just imagine Peter. Peter is so outgoing, so cool, and so bold. He says out loud what some of us think but don't think about. So here's Jesus, and he's saying, okay, I'm going to Jerusalem, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to die. It would be like in our culture today if you went to your boss's office and he said, hey, we're going to Minneapolis. What we're going to do is we're going to take, and all of our stocks are going to plummet. All of the people are going to get fired, and our company is going to go out of business by the end of the week, and there's going to be nothing left. You would be saying to your boss, that is ridiculous to say that kind of nonsense. So Peter takes Jesus, and I think he had really good intentions. He's got his arm around him, and he's saying, hey, Jesus, we got tons of crowds following us. Now, if you keep talking about suffering and dying, they're all going to leave. So Jesus does something interesting, and in my opinion, it's probably the meanest thing that Jesus ever did in the entire New Testament. He takes Peter in front of all of the disciples. He takes him in front of his 11 closest friends that have been hanging out together, and he brings Peter in, and then he looks right directly at the other 11 disciples, and watch what he says. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, and here's what he says, "Get behind me, Satan." Not exactly what you want to hear from God at that moment, right? Get behind me, Satan. And what I think he's getting at is that, hey, I am about to accomplish the mission I was born for. Since the Garden of Eden has been promised that I'm coming down, I'm going to Jerusalem, I'm going to suffer, be humiliated, be rejected, then I'm going to die on the cross, then I'm going to be resurrected, and you have no idea what God is wanting me to accomplish, and I'm not missing it no matter what. I'm all in, and I'm headed towards Jerusalem, and you are in my way, so get behind me, Satan, because you only have human concerns, and you do not even have the concerns of God. That had to be an incredibly painful moment for Peter, the clueless disciple. You see, we live in a world today, and it's the same back then, where we really want acceptance. Back in that 7th grade moment, the only thing I cared about was if other people liked me. But Jesus is telling his disciples that the path I'm taking you on is going to include some rejection. You see, we want admiration, we want approval. In fact, what we want is honor. But if I read the scripture right, the cross was designed to publicly humiliate a person. You see, we want comfort. We have special beds with comfort numbers. We have chairs that we sit in that are super comfortable. We only go on the vacations to the place that we're going to be totally safe. In fact, a lot of people aren't even going to travel across the airplanes to other places anymore because they're afraid of getting different viruses and stuff. We want comfort and security. We want acceptance. That's exactly what we want. But according to Jesus, if you decide to follow me, it might even end in your death. And I want you to wrestle with this. Don't blow it off. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to follow Jesus when it becomes difficult, inconvenient, uncomfortable, and hard? The reason I love Jesus is what he was about to do. Jesus was such a great leader. Not only did he tell them where he was going, not only did he foresee how difficult it was going to be for them to get there, but he slowed down in that moment and gave them some compelling reasons why it's worth it to follow him. And not only did he give them some compelling reasons so that they would be able to one day be able to accomplish the exact same thing that he accomplished, but he looked forward through history to you and to me to give us the kind of compelling reasons that would be able to motivate us to be able to become a courageous follower with a compelling reason to be able to do it. Can you tell I'm kind of excited? Verse 34. Then Jesus called the crowd to him, and I'm so glad he called the crowd because it wasn't just for his disciples, it was for every single person throughout history to hear. Along with his disciples, and he said, whoever wants, whoever desires to be my disciple, or the word right there is my follower. Now, what Jesus is going to say, there's a lot of churches today that aren't willing to say it. There are churches today that say stuff like this: if you follow Jesus, then everything will work out perfectly for you. If you follow Jesus, the benefits are so great that you're going to be able to do this. But if you look at all 4 Gospels, and in fact, 5 times in the Gospels, Jesus clearly says these words. If you want to be my disciple, then you must, not you could or you should, you must deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. And here's the way he's saying it. If you want to follow me, you have to follow me. And the only way you can follow me is to deny yourself and take up your cross. Deny yourself doesn't mean that you deny your personality, you deny all of your long-awaited dreams. What it means is you deny your own selfish interest and you're willing to put your own personal agenda off to the side. You see, there's the negative part of it, which is you deny yourself and you willingly choose not to have your own interest be the most important priority, but you have to take up. You have to move into, you have to pick up the cross and follow him. Now, the cross, back then, in those days, we see it kind of differently. We look out and we have crosses on our rings. We have crosses around our necks. Crosses is kind of a cool thing. But in the first century, that is not what a cross was. A cross was a sign of complete humiliation, because when you took up your cross, Rome was about to publicly demonstrate to everyone else around there that if you try to stand up against them, that is exactly what will happen to you. You must deny yourselves, take up your cross, and follow me. You have to be willing to put aside your own selfish desires and your agenda and willingly decide to follow Jesus. Now, Jesus is so smart and he's so wise that he's able to give 4 compelling reasons. And I would like to challenge anyone who's willing to go a little bit extra and sit with these questions for the next week or so. For me, I knew I was going to preach about this probably about a month. And I've been sitting with what Jesus said, and it's so profound. I want to start by saying that Jesus is so smart that it took me a while just to understand what he was even actually saying before I could put any reasons behind it. But one of the things that made it really difficult is he uses the word life and he uses the word soul. And if you look at it in the original language, it's exactly the same word. So the word for soul and life is the same thing. It can mean your physical life. It can mean your natural life, which we live on this world. It can also mean your true self, the part of you that is unique to you that no one else gets to be like, the part of you that you will carry with you beyond this lifetime. And Jesus, I think, is the master teacher, and he uses a word in such a way that it can mean either one of these, and it still stands to be true. And it is powerful no matter which one you choose, because it is so incredible what he says. And I read this probably 8 times before I even had the foggiest idea what Jesus was talking about. So I'm going to try to go a little bit slow, especially on this one. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever wants to save your soul will lose it. But whoever loses their life, it's the exact same word. Whoever loses their soul for me and for the gospel will save it. So here's what he says. If you set out to save it, you'll lose it. But if you're willing to lose it, then you can save it. Now, as I'm thinking about trying to explain this to you, the best way that I can come up with is to take and talk to you a little bit about a puppy, okay? Let's say that you have a puppy, and in the puppy, he has a favorite toy. And you go out to the store and you buy your puppy an incredibly cool toy, and you can't wait to give it to him. There's only one problem. When you get home to give the puppy the incredibly cool toy, he already has a lame toy in his mouth. And even though you have something way better, way richer, unless he's willing to drop the toy in his mouth, there's no way he'll get to play with the cool toy. Now, here's what I want you to think about. Some of you already have something in your hands, which is called your life or your soul. But God has something deeper, richer, better, But the only way that you get to experience what God has for you is to release what you already have. I'll give you a couple examples. Some of you have certain things that you're presently doing, and you're convinced that it's bringing you happiness, and something inside you tells you that there's a better way, but you're not going to let go, because if you let go, then you're going to miss out on what is really important and meaningful, and you're not willing to do it. For others of you, God is calling you to an adventure that could be unbelievably incredible, but because of your own desire for comfort, you're saying, I'm not going there. So what I'm thinking Jesus is talking about is you're going to have to release what you're holding on to in order to experience what he has for you. I want to try to say it in a different way. To whatever extent you hold on to the life you already have, you will miss out on the life he is offering. To whatever extent you try to hold on to the life you already have, you will miss out on the life that you're holding. I'm going to say it in a positive way. Why should you follow Jesus even when it becomes inconvenient, uncomfortable, difficult, and costly? Because if you do, if you deny yourself, if you take up his path, you will get to experience a life that is worth living, because you will get to experience the plan he had for you all along. I want to sit with the second question. This time, Jesus, the first one was a statement. This is just a question. But this question is profound when you just let it sit with you for a second. Here's what Jesus says. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world? Now, here's Jesus. He says, okay, let's play along. Okay, whatever the world is to you, for some of you, it's your reputation. For some of you, it's your business. For some of you, it's this trophy that you want to get in your case. For others of you, it's the title that you want to someday get. For others of you, it's the approval. And for some of you, it's to be able to have the security to be able to do what it is you want. Jesus says, okay, let's just play along. What is your world to you? Now, let's just imagine that you get everything that you want. You get the entire world. It could be $1 billion. It could be the approval, the elusive approval of your Father. Let's say you get it. But in order to get it, you have to forfeit or lose or have it taken away from you your true self or your own life. Is it worth it? So let's say you get it. You get all that money, you get all that approval, you get all that acceptance, you get all that security. Let's say you get all of that stuff. But in order to get it, it will cost you your very self or your own life. Is it worth it? Man, when you sit with that for a second, Jesus knew how to cut right to the heart of the matter. And he's able to ask a question that has stood the time of centuries that still penetrates people's hearts today. As I was wrestling with it, I thought, how can I say that in a more modern way? If you decide to go for your own agenda, then you will settle for accomplishments that will be short-lived and soon forgotten. You will give your life over to something that will leave you with emptiness in your soul and a bucket load of regrets. I'm going to give you a couple examples of that. Let's say that you are so lonely that you're looking for some kind of sense of intimacy and you're spending your time at night watching pornography. And what promises to satisfy that itch in your soul might leave you with the inability to even experience intimacy in the future. You see, there are certain things that promise everything, but in order to get it, it will cost you part of who you truly are. And it will not be a good exchange. If you do this, then you'll experience that. Let me say it in a positive way. Why should you follow Jesus when it becomes inconvenient, uncomfortable, difficult, and costly? Because if you decide to deny yourself, take up your cross, you will receive honor for doing something meaningful and important, and you will be rewarded with lasting peace and contentment that goes all the way down to the recesses of your true self. Here's another one. If those two haven't got you yet, Jesus is amazing, isn't he? So he says, okay, I'm going to ask you another question. Those two haven't even begun to question you a little bit. Or what can anyone give in exchange for your soul? So here he says, okay, if you get it, it costs you your soul, and you find yourself not even connected to your true self or missing your entire life, depending on which way you view it, what can you give in exchange for it? Would $1 billion be a good exchange so you could get your soul back? Let me try to say it in a different way. If you live for your own agenda and do what you want, you'll end up separated from God. And some of you don't even like this, but the possibility is that he will allow you to end up separated throughout eternity. And you'll miss out on the very purpose of your existence. Wow, that is a deep, profound thought just to wrestle with. Okay, let me say it in a positive way. If you want to follow Jesus, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, difficult, and costly, you will enjoy permanent security in a satisfied relationship with the source of life itself. Wow. Now, I remember being a junior high boy and not having any kind of compelling answer. I remember thinking that I want to stand up for Jesus, but I can't do it because I don't even have a little bit of an answer. Now, before we finish out this, I want to kind of bring a little bit of reality here, okay? As I read about this, most people think it's either black or white, either in or out, yes or no. Before we go to that conclusion, did the disciples, after this moment, perfectly follow Jesus throughout the rest of their life? By the time they get to chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 11, and chapter 12, Jesus keeps saying, are you so dull? Don't you understand? Now, the clueless disciple that we're looking at, Peter, okay, at the end of Jesus' life, when he was going to the cross, and he said, I need you this one time to be in with me. You remember when he's surrounded by a group of people, and there's this one junior high little girl right there? Very similar to the situation I found myself in. Does anyone remember what Peter did? Peter started calling down curses for heaven, saying, I don't even know the man. And here's what I want you to think about, is that maybe it's not just a one-time decision. Maybe denying yourself, taking up your cross, is something that if you do over a lifetime, you will be able to accomplish what God meant for you. And just because you missed it once doesn't mean it's over for you, because God is patient and he's caring about you, and he wants to give you the ability to carry this out, and at the end of your life, hopefully be at a place where you can confidently become the courageous follower that God is calling you to be. Here's one more. This one was terrifying to me because I grew up in a church where the pastor used to often say that if you deny Jesus publicly, it's over for you, because when he comes back with the angel armies, he's going to be ashamed of you and you're not going to be able to handle it. And I remember hearing a sermon about that the week before I encountered this situation. And here I am thinking, okay, I denied Jesus. That's my last chance. And I'm sitting here going, I want to be popular. I want to fit in. And I have nothing to give. And then I jumped in and I started teasing Mike Anderson. Is this what this means? That if you one single time deny Jesus, you're out for all eternity? I don't think so. Watch what it says. If anyone is ashamed of me and my words, this is one of the most motivational things I've ever read, is that I don't know about you, but I would rather please God than be in with anyone else. And when I get up here to teach, I would rather answer to God than please anyone else. If you're ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, or in a society or a culture that's completely wholeheartedly decided to reject God, then the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory along with his holy angels. Let me say what I sat with for a while. If you settle for the approval of people, if you decide that you're going to go with your own agenda, then what you're going to do is settle for the approval of people that can't even provide you security. That day, I settled for this girl and a bunch of other people to like me. but they can't even give me anything today. Let me say it in a positive way. If you decide that you're willing to follow Jesus no matter what the cost, if you decide that you're going to deny yourself and take up your cross, then you will receive the acceptance. And this is compelling, from the only one that ultimately matters. You see, why in the world should you and I follow Jesus when it becomes difficult? Because that is when we're going to be able to live the life that God made it for us. Then and only then, when we go through those barriers to the difficult part, are we going to get to experience who we were made to do, and we're going to get to keep our true selves with us all the way along the journey. And we will be completely immersed in the satisfaction that comes from knowing that the one that truly matters accepts me. And I don't know about any of the rest of you, but those are some pretty compelling reasons. As I get ready to close up today, I want to leave you with something. What about you? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to follow Jesus when it becomes uncomfortable, inconvenient, difficult, or costly? And what I hope is that you're at least motivated to ask the questions and discover some significant answers. I want to close out today by praying for you and for me so that we will have the ability to not just be admirers and not just be observers and not just be benefactors, but we would be willing to become courageous followers. Dear Heavenly Father, what you require of us, I promise, God, and I know in my soul it will be difficult, it will be inconvenient, it'll be uncomfortable, and it'll be hard. But God, help us to know that it will be worth it. Give us the courage to follow you courageously. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen.